I must welcome the next speaker, Mr. Lavish Ahuja. Uh, Probably first time, Lavish, you are connecting in this medium to us, and I must tell you that we have been regularly conducting training programs or awareness programs, and this medium is faculty development program, which is uh, for a time span of 5 days. And this particular program is especially confined to people who are teaching in engineering colleges across India. And I am happy and we are proud to announce that we have got faculty of some eminent engineering colleges of India joined for this FDP, and this has been an incredible audience. They have been hooked up for all the sessions, and we are so glad that people are so sensitive towards this topic, and they have been sending some questions, live chat questions, and we are extremely happy that you are here and you consented for being the speaker here. We are grateful to you. It's absolutely proud privilege for all of us that a person of your stature and your engagements has consented being a part of this FDP. Before I hand it over to you, Lavish, I will just give a brief introduction. Uh, Lavish Ahuja has more than 17 years of global experience in the topic of particularly of sustainability. And he has spent his time in India, Africa, Australia, and worked in Europe in this domain. Currently, he is Vice President Government Affairs for Tomra Systems, responsible for Indian subcontinent and based out of Gurgaon, India. He has done BE in management from Delhi College of Engineering, and he followed it by MS in Science Policy and Management from Lund University, Sweden. He's a recipient of prestigious Erasmus Mundus scholarship from European Commission. In past, he has been associated with organizations like CII, Brass Institute, Cardiff University, Holcim Cement, Vedanta Limited, Dalmia Brothers Limited, under various capacities related to handling and management of organizational sustainability performance, which is core interest and which is core area wherein we are talking about in this FDP. Core interest of Lavish include policy advocacy on sustainability aspects, but not just limited to environment and social impact assessment, biodiversity management, circular economy, corporate social investments. He is associated as visiting faculty for several MBA institutes in India, such as IIM Lucknow, NITI Mumbai, XMB Bhubaneswar, and he engaged with students for business sustainability and stakeholder engagement. And we are proud that Lavish is now associated with CPET also as one of the guidance and one of the guiding pillars, because CPET has this as its core value that we don't only promote plastic, but we more or less what we have been doing since last 10-15 years is that creating awareness down different strata of society. It's not only
Good morning.
faculty, it's students also, it's laymen also. We have been conducting sessions for school children across the country. We did one series of seminars. Samir Joshi sir was also associated with that. It was along the banks of Ganga. We started from Haridwar, then Gadmukteshwar, Allahabad, Varanasi, Kanpur, Patna, and then we went to Kolkata. And all along the banks of Ganga, it was a very successful program, and there were a lot of people engaged in this. Especially, we had separate sessions for rag pickers in all these locations. So the basic concept is to make people aware and create different platforms for people to think. And since this platform is especially for a particular type of people, we thought we did one such faculty development program in February, wherein we covered the basics of plastic recycling, the basic bookish or theoretical knowledge, or what are the practical aspects going on. So this is a sort of an advanced level of faculty development program wherein we thought of bringing in the change makers, the people who are actually thought behind the applications, various applications which are going to take this field by sway in next 10 years. So we are indeed lucky and we are honored by your presence, and I must say that the audience will be very much benefited, so shall we, all of us. Thank you so much for consenting and giving your valuable time right from Leh. Thank you so much. Please start your lecture for today.
Sure. First of all, it's indeed an honor for me to get this platform wherein I'm able to engage with such a high profile audience. So, and at the same time, you know, such kind of forums are extremely challenging for you when you have legends like Dr. Samir who are just presenting before your presentation. So they sort of raise the bar to the next level. And then obviously the minimum requirement for me also is to reach to that level. Not sure whether I'll be able to go to that level, but definitely I'll give it a try to fulfill the aspiration which has been kept on me. And I'll try, and good, thank you, Dr. Irfan, for setting the context, because that was very useful, and I can customize my representation of the facts which I have put here in a manner so that it is appreciable for the faculties who have joined here. So I'll try and do the best justice possible from my end. So I believe now the presentation will be done from their side, and I only need to tell them to change the slide. Is that thing correct? Dr. Irfan, presentation will be handled from your side?
Whatever you feel comfortable with.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm okay with that. Okay. And before we get into it, I just wanted to understand the format, because this is the subject I can keep on talking for next 7 days also without interruption. But I don't want to hammer people with too much detail in this very first session. Perhaps I want to generate an interest on this subject, and then if possible in subsequent sessions, we can get into more detail. So I would suggest maybe for an hour or so, I do the presentation, and then perhaps I would like to answer quite a few questions which get raised during the course of the presentation. Would that be a possibility?
Yeah, very wise, very wise. It's almost 12:10, so you can go till 1:15, and then we can take questions. Okay.
Fine. Because I'll be very happy to go with the questions, because that's something which I enjoy. I want to make it two-way communication as opposed to a simple classroom lecture sort of things. Okay, with that time and without further ado, I'll get into the presentation. First again, a very warm morning to you all. Rather now it's afternoon, because I was supposed to start at 11:30. So I'm here now currently in Leh with Dr. Samir. We are here for some projects out here, and we had got some good headways yesterday with engagement with Leh administration. So hopefully things are going in a positive way. The subject which I chose to present, and I had a discussion with Dr. Irfan some time back, is a tool which is known as deposit refund system. And I'm sure in earlier sessions, you may have come across the term which is known as extended producer responsibility. So basically, DRS is a subset of extended producer responsibility. And I will not resist in stating that of all the EPR tools available globally, which are being met to increase the collection rate and the recycling rate of packaging which is being put to the market, DRS is the most successful tool purely on the ground of a parameter which is known as collection rate. This is the only tool which is giving you a collection rate of as high as 98% in Germany compared to what is being put to the market. So the nearest, I would say, the EPR tool would be door-to-door collection, or maybe bring back systems, which is curbside collection. No other tool is anywhere closer, be it environmental tax, environmental sex, everything you do look at, nowhere it is close to it. And it's not me or as a Tomra we are saying, was the finding of OECD report of 2016. So I'm quoting that. But before I get into the nitty-gritty of this concept, I would like to do justice to the organization which I'm representing, because I'm using their man hours. So I need to do a little bit PR for them, and it's a truly deserving company in terms of PR. I would like to start with the introduction of Tomra. Can we go to the next slide, please? The next slide, please. Yeah. This is I would say, a branding slide for Tomra. Here, for a moment, you only look this picture from a loop point of view. And I'm sure in earlier presentation, I'm assuming that you would have heard this term, closing the loop or the circular economy, from various experts who would have taken session by now. So circular economy, which is a basic premise on which our business is based on. However, the value addition what Tomra brings on board is a next level of circular economy, which is nothing but clean loop recycling. Here we are adding a dimension of ensuring that whatever material which closes the loop is clean so that it gets into a high-end recycling. So for example, you can recycle anything to any other application. But what is more important from a circular economy point of view, you need to see whether the next phase or the next product which is coming out of a recycling, is it actually a true recycling or is it actually downcycling? Downcycling is something wherein a product after usage is getting processed and getting converted into a next product which has a lower end application. So of course, this is a very debatable matter. What do you classify as a low-end recycling or a downcycling and what is high-end recycling? But a common accepted norm is that, if you are doing recycling and producing a product with the same application, that is known as level cycling. And if it is used for a high-end application, then it is for high-end recycling. All other application wherein it is being used for an inferior purpose, then it is downcycling. So we as a Norwegian company, Tomra, we believe in promoting level and high-end recycling. So in order to facilitate, the important and the integral component is that material which is being recycled should have a clean input quality. Then the chances of it being used for a same application or a better application are higher. So that's what is the branding motto for Tomra. This is what a value proposition we want to bring in. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so they are the promoters of Tomra, Tori and Peter Planke. Tomra is a Norwegian multinational company. It came into existence in 1972. So perhaps next year we will finish 50 years of our existence. They are based out of Asker in Norway. At the moment, promoters, the equity is not more than 0.5%. So 99.5% of Tomra is institutional investors, and it is run by an institution now. So how the journey of this company begins it? So Tomra is, I would say, is the inventor of a machine known as reverse vending machine. I'm not sure how many of you have come across it. There are close to 500 machines installed here and there in India, wherein this machine is basically being used to collect the used beverage containers, be it PET bottle, aluminum can, HDPE or Tetra Pak. You might find it quite a bit in the touristic places where these machines are being put. So basically these machines are not a glorified dustbins. They are actually with the purpose. They have the functionalities which put them much ahead of a dustbin. So Tomra was the inventor of this machine. And now today in our journey of 50 years, close to 50 years, if I may put that way, we are the largest technology company in terms of reverse vending manufacturing. And I would also not hesitate in saying we are the most advanced technology provider in this. The kind of technology or the functionality which Tomra machine gives is unparalleled at the moment. If we are number one market leader, perhaps the next company who is manufacturing RVM would be somewhere around 7th or 8th rank. There's no comparison between us and them. So we are the largest company in that sense. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is something wherein the journey began with the RVM manufacturing. So what we did is in 2002, we expanded the business and we became a full-fledged technology company, which is based on sensor-based technology. Even in reverse vending machine, it uses a sensing technology wherein before it accepts any container, the sensor which is installed uses NIR technology, near infrared technology, to recognize the material. And if it is the eligible container, then only it accepts it. If it is not eligible, it is not something which machine recognize, the machine is not supposed to collect it. Okay, so we started with development of a technology known as RVM, and later on the organization felt that there is much more wider room for expansion of our technology. So we opened up a new division known as sorting division that also is based on sensing technology, wherein by virtue of our technology, we sort the various materials into useful fractions. And we have got the application in the food sector, mining sector, and more specifically, which is more relevant for today's audience, is sorting of mixed dry waste. So you have the concept of material recovery facilities, wherein the dry waste from the household or the institutional generators comes in. So you don't have to, only at the household level, you have to segregate the waste into dry and wet. Rest, once this dry waste comes to these material recovery facilities, either through manual sorting, which is more prevalent in India, or through automated sorting solution, where again we are the market leaders globally, we can sort the material into various fractions. So for example, if a dry waste coming from the household has paper, wood, metal, cloth, and different kind of plastic, PE, PS, PP, whatever, all 7 category. This machine or this sorting machine is capable of identifying each and every element of that dry waste and sorting it separately. So that's where we have revolutionized the global sorting landscape. And now close to 7,000 sorting machines are installed across the world. The largest plant, which is having TOMRA sorter, is of a capacity of 1,000 tons per day of waste generation, one in China and one in Norway. And India's largest plant where the TOMRA sorters are working effectively is a Nepara plant in Indore. But me as the department representative in India for the subcontinent, we are trying to advocate that we need more such big facilities for at least tier 1 cities where your waste generation ranges anywhere between 2,000 to 6,000 tons per day. You can't afford to have a manual 5 tonners or 10 tonners sorting. Otherwise, you will have like at the end of every road, one sorting facility, and you can't afford to have considering the land prices. So this is the concept which is going to change the landscape of waste sorting and improving the high-end sorting, resulting into high-end recycling. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this thing already I have explained in an earlier slide. These are the 3 divisions of earlier slide, please. Yeah, these are the 3 divisions of TOMRA. We have got a TOMRA collection solution wherein we manufacture RVM machines, and from RVM machine we collect the clean material, we facilitate it into high-end recycling. And high-end recycling for us, specifically from RVM point of view, is bottle-to-bottle recycling. That is, whatever PET bottle, for example, we collect it, that PET bottle is clean enough because of this solution, it can get converted into another PET bottle. I know in India, BIS and FSSAI as of now do not allow recycled content in the food grade material, but that is not the case elsewhere, especially in the developed country like US, Australia, and European Union, where there are mandatory recycled content targets being put in the legislation. And for them, BRS is the only solution to meet that target. Otherwise, all other collection systems fail to deliver that clean material, and they end up having not sufficient having the input feedstock to promote bottle-to-bottle recycling. The second one, recycling, there also our sorters are sorting waste from the ore. And last but not the least, we have a food sorting business wherein we sort the agriculture produce and meeting the requirement of the customer.
नमस्कार सर जी। अरे हम वो नेट आ गया कि नहीं आपके यहाँ?
I think can you ask them?
केविन में है, कहाँ पर है?
Okay, thank you. So to give you an example of our food sorting business, the 60% of the French fries which McDonald's sells in the market comes from the potatoes which are sorted by TOMRA. So that is the kind of example which tells you what we do. So it's listed in Norway. So our revenue last year was 9.9 billion kroner. So I know it's a funny currency. It equates to close to $1 billion US. And we are 4,300 employees spread across the world. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, this brings the purpose of why I am here, both as maybe this faculty for this course, as well as my major role in Indian subcontinent as a TOMRA representative. I'm sure some of you must have seen this mass balance diagram, which Ellen MacArthur had published way back in 2015. This is basically an example of mass balance of used plastic packaging, to be very specific. So what you see here is a very horrendous statistics. In fact, their very recent study has also shown that these figures have not changed dramatically in last 5 years. So what you can clearly say that of the 78 million ton of annual production of plastic packaging, which was put to the market across the world, only 14% of the material was collected for recycling. Rest 84% of the packaging was let into the environment, either in the form of littering the rivers, drains, or getting into the landfill, or perhaps being burned as a fuel, either under the co-processing or as a waste heat recovery plants or the boilers where this plastic is going as a RDF material. So 84% of material is getting wasted, which of course tantamount to huge economic loss, and actually it derails the whole idea of circular economy. Anyways, the story is very horrendous, but another factor wherein I would like to bring your notice is this 14% recycling. Now, of this 14% recycling, it is estimated close to 4% of losses are there in the process. Again, going by thermodynamic law, that 100% transformation is not possible, so there are losses. Then what is left? You have 8% material going to the downcycling application, which again undermines the concept of circular economy. To give you an example, I don't know what other speakers have told. I'm not a big fan of PET bottle being used for a textile purpose or being converted into a shoes. To my understanding, or perhaps the stand which TOMRA takes as a circular economy think tank in the world, we consider that as a downcycling application. The reason why I say so, again, it can be debated, that you are converting PET into another form, which eventually cannot be recycled back to the same product and would end up in the landfill or maybe the environment. So what you are doing by downcycling application, you are only delaying the disposal to the environment by maybe a couple of years, but you are not closing the loop. And that's what when I was talking about the closed loop recycling, that's where we are very strong, ardent opposition of using the textile application of PET. We do not support that. But yes, there can be counter arguments, something is better than nothing. Well, yes, we are in the transitionary world, everything is possible. But on a long-term perspective, if you are not using material for the same application, you are downcycling. This is an accepted norm. So going by that assumption, only 2% of the material is coming back for the same application, or which can be truly considered as a level cycling or a high-end recycling. Now, this is a very bad situation from a world point of view. And I know Dr. Samir in earlier slide, when I joined 15 minutes before my time. So he was commenting about the whole thought process which we need to embrace. And that thought process is something which has to increase this 2% into much higher figure. What you see in these number 1, 2, 3, 4, these are the areas where TOMRA has got technologies to minimize the leakage to the environment through our collection solution as well as sorting solution. However, the department which I represent and perhaps the presentation which I am doing, I'm not trying to create a market for TOMRA products. It's just to let you know that we have got solutions for all the discharges or leakages to the environment. But the most important KPI for me or my department is to enhance this closed loop recycling, which is currently 2%. So in 2019, our CEO, Stefan Ranstad, he made a commitment at Davos in World Economic Forum that if we use this as a basis of plastics packaging situation in the world, TOMRA as a company will facilitate through its network, through its engagement, through its advocacy, and perhaps a knowledge sharing session like this, we would like to increase the current recycling rate of 14% to 40%, and the closed loop recycling from 2% to 30%. And I have no shame in telling that alone TOMRA cannot do it. It is through like-minded people, through common horizon on the long-term future, through common understanding of goals and objectives, this is possible. And I see today's session as one of the contribution in making this reality for us. So that is the main objective which I have to deliver for TOMRA in Indian subcontinent. Can we go to the next slide, please? Just to give you an idea of what is the scale and the scalability of our collection business, more specifically collection of the PET bottles through RVM. These are some of the statistics which can give you some idea of the scalability which TOMRA enjoys, or let's say the market leadership. Last year, perhaps we collected 40 billion containers through our machines. Well, it's a very huge number. However, this number gets dwarfed because same year, close to 1.3 trillion containers was being put in the market. So currently through our technology, we are only capturing 2 to 3% of the market, which TOMRA has envisioned to make this 40 billion to 500 billion by 2030. Now, this is a long-term vision which is driving TOMRA's every business vertical so that we can deliver this. It's a huge number, very big number, and it is not possible without involving Asia as a part of business strategy. And for this reason, they had opened this position, which I was lucky enough to get way back in 2019, late 19. And I'm running with this vision of converting this 40 billion containers to 500 billion. And I am hopeful that Asia may contribute somewhere around 250 to 3 billion containers in making that 500 billion. Because already systems in the developed market, they have almost reached to their plateau. The real crux lies in Asia and Africa, and that's where the next growth trajectory lies. Rest all, another staggering figure worth noticing. Through our machine, while collecting, we are refunding the deposit, and I'll come to that later, little later. We have refunded close to 6.8 billion euros in terms of deposit. So that's a huge number, and we are the largest player with these statistics to support. But again, we are only capturing 2% or 3% of the market. So you can see the volume of expansion in this particular sector. And the way circular economy is becoming a buzzword, we see this becoming a reality very soon for us, even before 2030. And we are hoping to make it that way. Next slide, please. I need to be wary about the time. Yes. So I represent a governmental affairs. Next slide, please. I'll go a little bit fast so that we can cover most of the things. Next slide, please. So again, my one slide earlier. Yeah, one slide earlier. Yeah, this one. So next slide. Yes. So I do not represent any commercial wing of TOMRA. I represent a department which is known as governmental affairs, with the main mandate of policy advocacy and knowledge sharing, work with the stakeholders like policymakers, recyclers, associations, your state departments, think tanks, and of course, academics like CPETs and the research institute like CPETs, so that we can increase the knowledge on how do we operationalize the circular economy. That is a mandate of this role which I'm playing. Can you go to the next slide? So we are a team of 20 people spread across 5 continents. I would say we are some sort of experts when it comes to circular economy and deposit refund system, to be very particular. And you can see the geographical representation. So I am responsible for Indian subcontinent and a bit of Africa, also currently working with Mauritian government in implementing their deposit refund system. So all are with the background of circular economy with no commercial linkage involved from the business, purely a think tank department or a knowledge sharing department. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, now let's get into the main business today. Here we are talking about the concept of deposit refund system. As already highlighted, the most successful system under EPR as on today. No comparable opponent for now. Next slide, please. Now, I'm assuming many of you would have seen this phenomena of the refillable bottles when we used to buy Thumbs Up or Limca, Mirinda and Fanta in glass refillable bottles. And you could imagine then when you used to buy those glass refillable bottles from a shop owner, he used to keep a deposit with him so that once you return that bottle, that deposit is refunded. So by and large, deposit refund system is on a molecular level, that concept only. Okay. Now, like many things, something originates in India, goes out, get converted into a strategic model, repackaged, and come back to India as a best practice. So this is also another classical example which originated in India. And now again, today I am trying to teach you the same thing which was part of our culture way back. But anyhow, as a concept, assuming the basics are the same, has matured dramatically. And now it has become a self-sustainable model, actively running in 40 countries. 10 more countries are going to join in next 1 decade. And I would say by 2050, I would say 90% of the world will be Can I request you to go on mute, please? Am I audible? Right. Okay. So this system is majority, I would say 99% being used for a beverage containers collection system. So what happens is when you go to a shop, you buy a beverage container, be it a Coke, Pepsi, or a juice, you pay the cost for the beverage. And on top of it, you pay a deposit, which is fully refundable, provided you return that container to a formalized collection network and you don't end up littering it. So if you look at it in a layman term, you are basically buying the content of the beverage and you are leasing the packaging. So once you have taken the utility of the beverage, you return back the containers. And if you don't return, you end up losing your deposit. So when you lose a deposit, this actually can be understood in a layman term that you are being taken as a polluter pay principle. You are linked with polluter pay principle. So you lose your deposit because you have polluted it, you have littered, so you lose your deposit. But yes, the key fact in this deposit is 100% refundable, provided you bring it back to a formalized collection network and not putting it in any dustbin or littering around, which is a very common or rampant activity across the world. So by and large, it is a very basic concept from a design point of view and exemplary performer when it comes to EPR. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yes. Now, this is something which I touched upon in the beginning. When I say that deposit is the most successful EPR tool as on date compared to other, for beverage containers, let me put it upfront very clear to all of you. It will be expanded to other commodities down the line. But from a systemic point of view, this is the most matured application for now. You can clearly see on your extreme left that deposit has achieved, this is a global average, right? 86% global average for collection rate. In Germany, it is 98%. As opposed to door-to-door collection for the beverage container, this is global average of 54%. and bring back system, perhaps something very related to curbside system, it is 43%. So you can see a dramatic difference between the return rate and the recycling rate when it comes to deposit in other EPR tools. Another important factor which is becoming more prominent in today's context is the material quality, because I've been emphasizing big time on high-end recycling and all. So when we talk about high-end recycling, the key factor is the input feedstock quality. So compared to all other collection system, this one sort of isolate the beverage streams from the other waste collection system. So likelihood of it getting commingled or contaminated with any other kind of waste is almost nil. Okay, so eventually what is the consequence of it? You end up getting a clean material which can be recycled at a much higher quality compared to the one which comes from the mixed waste, because you never know, that container may have come in touch with phenyl or some other hazardous material, who knows. So what you do is then you end up putting a lot of processes of cleaning, washing, this and that. So eventually in this entire process, the mechanical integrity of the material goes for a toss, and at the same time you are also creating other environmental hazards by putting a lot of processes and creating effluents of cleaning and everything. So in terms of quality input or high quality output of DRS, this is a biggest USP why it is being seen as a potential EPR tool across the world, because collection is one part of it, and what do you do with the collected material is another part of it. But it very much depends on how you have collected that material. That's where DRS is a key. Another thing you all must be pondering, that why as of now the application has been restricted to beverage container. Well, it's not that it is going to be limited to that, but yes, why the beverage container was chosen, because a lot of marine litter studies have undertaken in last, I would say, one and a half decade. The most reputable is the one which was done by Ocean Conservancy, and they did it in 2014 and they again did it in 2020. And you can see the results. Results are no different from what we saw last time. These are the top 10 items which were collected from 500 samples across the world from the oceans. And what you see, out of top 10 items collected from the ocean litter, 5 of them are directly or indirectly related to beverage segment, be it beverage bottles, be it in the glass bottle or a plastic bottle, bottle caps, straws, and beverage cans. So these 5 elements in terms of volume represented 37%, and in terms of weight represented 78%. So that is itself a strong argument to have something very specific solution targeting this particular commodity or this particular segment of packaging. So for this reason, globally, as of now, DRS is being used for beverage container. But yes, for example, South Korea. Now South Korea is extending this DRS system for tea and coffee cups, because their existing system has got matured and they believe that this system can be expanded to other commodities. Now they are developing a DRS system which will collect close to 10 billion coffee and tea cups in South Korea, run under depository fund system. And TOMRA is supporting them in developing that law. So I believe this is, I would say, a compelling case for DRS, notwithstanding the amount of awareness which is increased amongst the youngsters, and of course, I would say larger population as a whole. And then brands are also coming up with their commitments on the recyclability, reusability, and the recycle. So all those things put together is creating a very compelling case for depository fund system. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. Next slide, please. Now, this is what I'm talking about, how the DRS is getting proliferated across the world. What you see in the blue are the countries where the DRS is already implemented. And what you see in the brackets is the year when the DRS was rolled out. What you see is in the green is the countries where the governments have already taken a decision to roll out the DRS, because typically the date of DRS announcement and the date of launching the DRS has a lag in between. Why? Because you will understand in subsequent slides that this require development of a foolproof system, which also involves massive awareness campaigns amongst the people so that they know why the DRS is being put. So it's not something which you can put overnight. So perhaps it requires anywhere between 1.5 to 2 years of preparation, and then only you can deliver a fully functional DRS. So you can clearly see Australia is nearly under DRS by 2023. When Victoria implements it, entire continent will be under DRS. European Union, I think around 12 states are already having it, and quite a few other states have already given commitment, and we are pretty sure by 2030, because European Union Single-Use Plastic Directive will force them to have DRS as a tool to meet the obligation under that directive. In Africa, Mauritius is a front bearer. In Asian subcontinent, Singapore is the one who has made the announcement for all beverage packaging, and South Korea already have covered. So you can see that slowly and steadily this concept is proliferating, and it is only proliferating because it is delivering the result. Country like Norway, it is there in place since 1999. If it would not have been delivering the objective, it would have been scrapped like many other policy decisions by now. So these years I have specifically put to give you an idea that for how long these systems are running, which shows that systems are delivering the results. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is European Union Single-Use Plastic Directive, which will make entire EU continent a DRS continent by 2030. The reason being, the Single-Use Plastic Directive has given very formidable targets, what you see on your right side, this one, that by 2025, all plastic beverage bottles need to be collected up to 77% against what is being put to the market. And by 2029, 90% should be collected against what is being put to the market. Another intimidating, I must put it this way, target which they have given to the member states, that all plastic beverage bottles need to have a recycled content of 25%, which is rPET, and 30% by 2030. Now, this is one of the biggest challenge for European Union, that how do we meet these two targets? So DRS is a recommended policy tool as per SUPD, that if you put DRS systems, you can easily meet these targets. So now deposit is slowly, steadily becoming a license to operate in many countries, and it's not just a choice, it's becoming license to operate. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is again the representation of what I've already told, that these are the DRS schemes launched by various countries on a decadal basis. So you can see 2029 decade, already 20 DRS schemes have been launched across the world and are under various phases of implementation, which is almost close to equal to what has happened in last 3 decades. And why this decade DRS is seeing? Because the concept of EPR is becoming more and more commonplace. So whenever the EPR is being discussed, when it comes to beverage containers, DRS is only the solution. So that is also leading to a big time proliferation. Next slide, please. So how does DRS work in action? Can we go to the next slide? Okay, now don't get intimidated by seeing this is a very complicated structure. It is not a complicated structure. It is a very simple structure, but perhaps here we have tried to show you how it is different from the other model, how it works more as a business model as opposed to a normal policy model. Here, there are 3-4 things which are most important from a transparency or the effectiveness of EPR point of view. One, there should be tracking of movement of the material, availability of the data, so that at a click of button, you can get to know what was being put to the market and what is collected. Likewise, the deposit, because here the consumer money is involved. So what is the transparency and the traceability of that money movement? So all these things have developed immensely in last 40 years. So these systems are now foolproof. At a click of button, you will get to know what is the current status of deposit, what is the current status of used beverage container, what is the current collection rate, and how much we are fulfilling the target which we have kept. So what you see here is the most important element of a DRS model is centralized organization. These are typically not-for-profit organizations whose main role is to effectively run a deposit refund system. They are the heart of the system. Now, let me quickly take you through how it works without getting into the detail because of the lack of time. Now, you have a producer and an importer here. It could be Pepsi, Coke, Unilever, Nestle, whichever is your favorite brand. Let's say government under deposit refund system has legislated that any beverage container you buy, you need to pay a deposit of 5 rupees. So when a retailer or a wholesaler goes to the producer and buys, let's say 100 Coca-Cola can, then he has to pay the can cost plus he has to pay 500 rupees as a deposit to the producer. Okay. Since this money belongs to the consumer, so producer immediately transfers this deposit amount to the centralized organization. Okay. By the way, whatever products or containers which is being sold by the producer, they have to be barcoded for the DRS model. That means this container has been sold along with the deposit. Okay. And those barcodes can be read and we can trace the movement of deposit as well as the movement of the container. So a shop owner A comes back, he sells to consumer, consumer buys the drink, he pays the corresponding amount of deposit, which is for now getting hold up with shop owner till the time he makes the next purchase from the producer. The same consumer, after consumption of the beverage, decides to return the container because he wants his deposit back. He has a choice. He can go to the same shop or he can go to another shop because the shop needs to be authorized collection center. This all work is done by centralized organization who identifies the collection network and they give them all the required logistics to support that. So this shop owner collects the bottle, he scans the barcode and he gets a confirmation that this is an eligible container on which the deposit was paid and he refunds the deposit to the consumer. So now consumer is free from all the obligation. Now, there are two options for collection. One is the manual collection, wherein a shop owner can dedicate a particular space in his shop where he can keep these used beverage containers, or possibly he can use the automated solution which is known as reverse vending machine, and he can install it outside his shop wherein people can come and put the container, machine scans the barcode and based on eligibility issues the money in the form of digital money or perhaps some redeemable voucher which you can use against your next purchase. So once the barcode is scanned, immediately information goes through cloud to centralized organization, wherein the centralized organization reconciles the barcode data given by the shop owner and what he got from the producer. The moment the number matches, the centralized organization releases the deposit amount to the shop owner, okay, through net banking. And on the top of the deposit, what he has paid to the consumer, he is also paid an additional retail handling fee because this shop owner is making an extra effort in collecting the used beverage containers. Otherwise, he's supposed to sell the products for consumption. He's not supposed to be collecting the waste material. To incentivize his effort, he is paid a handling fee. And then based on the fixed frequency, the logistic provider goes and collects the used beverage container. He brings it to the centralized consolidation center because they are connecting the PET bottles, HDP, Tetra Pak, and whatnot, all kind of them. So those all containers are collected from all the collection centers or emptied from the reverse vending machine. They all come to the centralized facilities where they are sorted, reconciled, and sold to the recycler. Now here you need to keep in mind, this quality material is much better than what you get from conventional waste management because it is a clean material. It does not come in touch with anybody else. So here you get a premium price because the downside application will not be requiring too much of money. So the recycler tends to pay higher price. So this revenue goes to the centralized organization. And on top of it, producer also pay a per unit administration fee to the centralized organization as a part of EPR fee. And I will explain you the rationale behind that in subsequent slide. Can we go to the next slide, please? By the way, this is Scandinavian model, more common in Northern Europe and Western Europe. This is another model of DRS. DRS is extremely flexible model. Each country, in fact, out of 40 DRS which are implemented across the world, there is no 2 DRS which are identical. Depending on the socio-economic situation, you can have a couple of things being changed, whatever works. So in the case of German and North American model, you don't have a centralized agency. Here, everything is done by PROs, Producer Responsibility Organization, on behalf of producer. Come to the next slide. Then there's a latest model, which is, I would say, the most popular model, which is known as the New South Wales model of DRS. Here you have a centralized operator, and under that you have something known as network operator, which is a separate entity altogether. So this entity basically works on ensuring that logistic and collection is delivered to the highest standard. So these all modifications are happening to increase the efficiency of the system. For example, over last 2-3 years, you have reached to a plateau collection rate of 88%. Now, what do we do that? We still have a gap of 12%. So we need to do some more kind of customization and modification. And that's how different kind of DRS models are coming up every second or third year. So this is also a latest model. As of now, they have reached to a 77 collection rate. But in 3 or 4 years time, we will be seeing this one will be delivering anywhere above 92%, but we have to wait and watch. So what you see is the red color reflects how the material moves, the green reflects how the deposit moves, and then in subsequent slide you see the information, how does it move from one place to. So it's a foolproof system which ensures that there is no leakages, there are no fraudulent activities, and everything is available on the press of button. A full-fledged DRS on a press of button can give you how many Coke bottles were put in the market and how many bottles have been collected during a particular period of time. So no requirement of any kind of paper trails, no requirement of any kind of evidence. Everything is on cloud because this is all being done through a barcode or QR coding, and everything is being traced as a part of blockchain technology. So nothing, no fraudulent activity possible, and definitely in relative terms. And another important aspect is, which you will see in subsequent slide, these systems are famous amongst the consumers, amongst the policymakers, but not amongst the producers and brand owners, purely for the reason that these systems are working on a true cost of waste management. Here you can't play around that I am getting an EPR certificate at 20 paisa in Mumbai and 15 paisa in Nagpur, so I will buy from the Nagpur guy. No. Here you have a fixed and reflective true waste cost management, which is being transferred to the producer as an EPR fee. Can we come to the next slide, please? These are basically the roles which we believe that centralized system, the Scandinavian model, is the most efficient model. Although German model is delivering 98%, but German, as you know, by design are complicated people and they require complicated things. So for a country like India, I would not advocate these kind of systems because multiple PROs also creates the opportunity for frauds, opportunity of wherever it requires more focus on the enforcement. So we don't advocate it. But yes, if you are a smart country like Germany, you can afford complexity. But if your already systems are way too complicated and your people are not completely aligned with the circular economy principle, then these kind of systems can really create a massive enforcement tragedy for the policymakers because they can't track it. So we do not recommend it, but if somebody wants to do it, we can help because we have equal competence in such systems as well. Can you go to the next slide, please? I have 15 more minutes to finish. Next slide, please. Next. Okay. So how does the system works? Cost economics. The first question everybody asks, are these systems expensive? That's the one of the biggest, I would say, criticism created by opponents of such system. Let's look at what are the key elements of cost and economics. Let's start with a good story. What are the revenue streams? So every brand owners who enters to the market needs to be registered with the DRS operator, and you have to pay a fixed annual fee of it. It can be a subset of a EPR fee, or it can be a separate fee also. Then you need to also pay a producer fee, which I will explain you in the next slide, on a per unit you have sold into the market. Then the revenue which comes when you sell the collected material to the recycler. Here the ownership of the material, be it PET can, aluminium, HDPE, everything ownership lies with the system operated. Then obviously another big source of revenue is unredeemed deposit, because these kind of systems which are affecting the behavior of the consumer, it takes time. You will not find 100% collection on the day one. It will start with 60%, 65, 67, 68 and all. Of course, there are exceptions like country like Latvia, not Latvia, it was Lithuania. In 2017, they launched, at that point of time, the collection rate of 32%. By 2019, it was 92% already. But that has not been the case. It is exceptional by all standard. Typically, it increases 5 to 7% on a year-to-year basis, but also very much designed on the how robust your design, or perhaps what kind of loopholes you have in your system. And then, of course, whatever money which comes in, then you can also, till the time it gets converted into expenditure, you can put the money in FDs or markets, mutual funds and all. So you also get the interest. So X is the income which comes from this system. What are the expenses? The expenses are the handling fee, which you are giving it to the collection, the one who is doing collection for you. It could be the retailer, or it could be the one who has installed the RVM. Okay, so whosoever is collecting on your behalf is the one who has to be paid as a retail handling fee for the effort he is making for the DRS. Then you have a fee known as logistic fee, or a reverse logistic fee, wherein the trucks or small size vehicles are sent to the collection points to bring back the containers to the centralized facility. Then, of course, administration and the management cost of your deposit refund organization or the DRS operator. And last but not the least, but equally important, is marketing and the information in the PR. Because you need to create massive awareness amongst the people for the DRS. They need to understand why I should be giving the deposit, what happens to my deposit, what happens to the material which I'm not putting in the dustbin and I'm giving into the collection center. These kind of things really impact comes when you create a massive awareness. So the X is your revenue, Y is your cost. The difference between X and Y is the one which is being transferred to the producer as an EPR fee, which I was telling you earlier. The producer fee per unit is the one which is being transferred. Come to the next slide, please. That will give you much better idea. So what you see here is the four kind of cost elements: handling fee, logistic fee, admin, and marketing. This is the cost side of it. What you see here is the revenue stream. You have sales of the material, you have unredeemed deposit, and whatever is left over is passed on as an EPR fee to the producer. Okay, I have not put the revenues from the FDs and all because they are not significant. So if I have to give you some ballpark estimates, let's say if there's 100 rupees cost of the system, 40 rupees goes as a handling fee, 30 rupees goes as a logistic fee, and 15 rupees goes as an admin and marketing fee. This is global average. 20% comes from the sales of the revenue, and 20 to 40% comes from the unredeemed deposit, and whatever is left, somewhere around 30 to 40% comes as a EPR fee. Okay, now let me show you a real life example from an annual report of Norwegian DRS, which is run by a company known as Infinitum. So here you see all these black colors are the cost and the green colors are the revenue. And these are the numbers based on the collection rate of 89.4%. So for 10.6% uncollected, this is the model. Now here you see the 49% of the system cost is offsetted by unredeemed deposit. Mind you again, collection rate is missing by 10%, but that 10% is covering the 49%. And how it is possible? Because they have kept one of the highest deposit amount in the world compared to global average. So when you have a very high deposit amount, so unredeemed can cover a massive cost of the system operation. So here what you see is only 8% of the system cost is being attributed to the producer as a EPR fee, while remaining 92% of the cost is being offsetted by the revenues with the system. So in that sense, these systems are actually, if implemented properly, without any malified intention, if I may put that way, these systems are the most cost-effective systems from the producer. But why still producers don't like them? There is a strategic reason for that, and I'm not blaming that. Perhaps maybe one day if I work for a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi, I may also raise objection on one point, is because it is way too transparent for them to share that information, because they feel very high risk that these kind of system can give the data to their competitors that this how big my market is. These many containers are going to the market, and this is what is being collected. So they will also be exposed to regulatory risk. And Pepsi's containers are collected by 98%, and your container, Coke's containers are only getting collected by 75%. So then there will be a, I would say, differential treatment to these companies. So they don't like such high transparent systems. But yes, the countries where the DRS system is by law, they are the one who are embracing it the most. But in any country where the enforcement is weak, laws are not clear, they will give a massive pushback to such system. And I'm telling you from my experience of last 2 years, and I'm doing all kind of advocacy about this system, that it can be used in Indian context. So I'm getting a tremendous pushback from these beverage companies. Why? Because the cheaper alternates, the fake paper trails and fraudulent measures are much cheaper than the DRS. And I'm pretty sure and confident when you have a fake paper trail to fulfill your EPR obligation, no system in the world will be competitive. But that's where the governments have to decide when they are looking for solution. They're actually looking for reducing the environmental impacts, and they have to enforce the true waste management costs. Then these are the EPR tools they have to embrace. Rest all, it's like, you know, it sometimes acts more as a fool's paradise, wherein you feel that everything is honky-dory, everything is going well. All the brands are meeting their 100% EPR targets, but in every nook and corner, you are finding plastic packaging. So either your claims are wrong or the reality, what you are seeing, is wrong. So we need to decide what is working and what is not working. Anyways, we go to the next slide, please. So this is a survey undertaken by across the world, wherein the DRS is being implemented, and you can see the confidence level of people, especially they are feeling proud, because now that they know that they are not contributing towards littering, they are putting in a formal system, and these material which is being put in the system is actually converting into bottle-to-bottle recycling or other high-end application. So these are public testimonial with the global average of 80.4% satisfaction. This is not TOMRA statistics. This is the statistic which we have gathered from various governments where DRS is operating. Next slide, please. Okay, this is another phenomena which has come up in all these developed countries, specifically, if I may say so, because of the deposit which is involved in there, they tend to donate that deposit for social or environmental causes. Some people even donate their bottles to poor people so that this deposit amount can help them financially. Like for a country like India, you can imagine if there is a 5 rupees deposit on a Coke bottle, if I'm throwing, then in all likelihood, somebody from the informal sector will pick it up, for example, rack picker, and he can give it to the formal collection and he'll be the owner of the deposit. So whoever brings back the material is the owner of the deposit and not the one who purchases it. Let me make it very clear that way. So you imagine if I talk about DRS system in Indian context, today a rack picker is collecting 35 bottles to make it 1 kg of PET, and he gets anywhere between 10 to 15 rupees based on how the oil prices are there. So after giving 35 bottles, he is getting 15 rupees. Now imagine if he finds 15 liter bottles under the DRS system with the deposit of 5 rupees, he gets 75 rupees. That's where it is the case. Yes, you will say that now people will be retaining, so the less littering will happen. I would agree, the volume accessible to these rack picker will be less, but for every bottle, the revenue will be much, much higher, which they were getting other way around. And however, they need to be compensated for those materials which have low recyclable value. Today, why a rack picker is not picking up the MLP or other thing? Because there is no recyclable value. So don't you think the EPR fee for those non-recyclable or less recyclable should actually be supporting these rack picker? Today, if a company like PepsiCo, if he pays 3 rupees for let's say your chips packaging, if you return that packaging, I will give you 5 rupees. Do you think you will find any of these packaging on a littering grounds or any dump sites? You will not find. So today what is happening is the EPR system are distorted. They are focusing more on easily recyclable, and they are not focusing on the one which is not getting recycled or picked up. So the true EPR should focus on those kind of packaging wherein the producer should bear the brunt of putting into the market and should actually bear the cost. So if the EPR is designed in a manner focusing on non-recyclable, you will see the littering problem will just fade away in a matter of years. Today, because of a distorted design or push and pull, political influence, business influence, whatever systems we have is not delivering what it is supposed to do in terms of principles of the design. Anyways, getting back to the subject. So a lot of people, I mean, I believe close to 135 million US dollar people have donated their deposit across the world. So that also is another way where people feel proud that I'm contributing to environment, first by bringing the bottle back to the formal system, and second by donating my deposit for a noble cause. Next slide, please. So what makes DRS as a business case? So these are essentially the 5, next slide, please. These are 5 proven business or strategic benefits of DRS vis-a-vis conventional EPR tool. The first one is, and I would request Dr. Irfan to circulate these slides to all of them, because subsequent slides I will not go into detail and I will cover 4 or 5 slides in this one slide. DRS systems, we have seen empirically across 40 markets, reduces the cost for municipal waste management system. Some of you must be thinking that the recyclables which are getting into municipal bills are actually giving the revenue stream for the municipality. You are right in assuming that. But once the DRS is put in place, these materials will not be available for municipality to cover up the cost. However, this revenue loss gets compensated by reducing the amount of waste which needs to be transferred, reducing the sizes of the bins which are collecting the waste material, reducing the cost of cleaning of the littered material, and less exhaustion of your landfill space. So we have done empirical studies which have proven statistically, if we take away the negativity of loss of revenue from the recyclable material, on overall basis, the municipal end up saving much more money by implementing the DRS. And subsequent slides have given the statistics, so I will not get into detail. I'm just telling you on a conceptual level in the for the sake of time. Then the job creation potential. When you implement a DRS system, like the one which I show you, the proper flow diagram, it has been seen these kind of system create additional 5 to 11 times green jobs, be it collection points, be it the centralized facilities, be it higher volume of coming for the recyclers, be it the logistic providers. So if you put all together, there are empirical evidence from 5 to 11 times. Then obviously increased collection rates. Or I have told you that on an average, the collection rate is above 85 to 88%. So that is something which is unchallengeable. That is an established fact for the collection rate. Obviously, empirical evidence also shows that the littering rates have dramatically come down. And last but not the least, as I've been emphasizing all through the presentation, this system provision a massive, huge, clean material, which tomorrow can promote your circular economy. Today, BIS and FSSAI is not allowing the recycled content in the food grade because of genuine reason. They are not sure about the traceability of the material. They are not sure about the transparency of the material, and they don't want to allow something which can tomorrow create a disaster for the country. Imagine the PET which has been used to store the phenyl and now is becoming the PET for drinking water. So they are right. So they are not allowing. So when they are not allowing, the industry is not putting effort in clean collection system when nobody is asking for the food grade. So they are not putting. So now we have come to a catch-22 situation. They are not doing because they are not sure about the feedstock. So now there is no demand for this feedstock. So the recyclers and brand owners are not doing anything. So we have to break this chink. Till the time Government of India, be it BSI or FSSAI allows, if we put a DRS system and we bring a clean material through such system, which is traceable, which is transparent, this can become a huge rPET market of export to the countries where there is a recycled content law. California as a state has made 50% recycled content law to be achieved by 2030. Now, countries in Asia are huge generators of PET bottles. I am told I stand to be collected close to 100,000 metric ton of PET is being put to the market in India. And 97% of that PET is going for textile and other low-end application. First of all, you are doing a sin by putting it in a downcycling application. And second of all, you are missing a huge opportunity of exporting this material till the time your regulator allows to use in the market. China, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Singapore, they are embracing DRS now, not for usage in their own countries, but to tap a European market or an American market. So that's what is a huge strategic and economic benefit for a country like India, wherein we can collect clean material. If not being used today in our country, let's take the advantage of export. And tomorrow, if our governments allow, we can have a huge chunk of recycled content in our food grade, thereby promoting the circular economy and reducing less of a virgin material. I think with this here, Dr. Irfan, I would like to stop. There are more slides which are more of a informative in nature. Maybe I can summarize in few lines for them. So TOMRA as a company has been involved in last 40 years in designing this DRS system for the state governments or the central governments, purely as a think tank. So what we have done is, based on success and failures, because not every DRS system is running at the same capabilities or same deliverability. So what we have done is, based on our 50 years of experience, we have identified certain essential elements which need to be considered when you are designing a DRS scheme or the law for the country. And these elements or principles are non-negotiables. They are not a menu for you to choose. They are actually all to be included in designing the DRS. Level and extent of implementing those tools or elements is a function of socio-economic economic condition of the country. So as I mentioned, the DRS design is extremely flexible, but you need to cover all the elements in some form or the other, which is in alignment with your socio-economic condition. Maybe I will quickly ask to go to the second last slide or last slide. Directly, I can show you those elements. These are some of the stats which I have shown to prove my points. Come down, come down, come down, come down. Okay, come down, come down. I will not have it, spend time in this one. Come down. Okay, I'll spend maybe another few minutes here. So these are the 4 principles. If properly implemented, your DRS will deliver anytime above 85%. This is based on our empirical assessment. The system should be designed with performance in mind. That means each DRS system should start with a target in mind. For example, that we need to reach to a PET collection target of 95% by 2030. So unless you have targets in place, you will not have a willingness to deliver it, and you will not continuously upgrade your system, because surrounding environment will keep on changing, and you can't continue with a design which you made in 2021 to go in 2030. So you need to continuously upgrade the system, fill in the loopholes, so that your ultimate vision of target should be there. Another important aspect is that the deposit amount which you choose, that has a tremendous bearing on the scheme's success. A very high deposit may encourage fraudulent activities, because people may end up manufacturing the bottles which are less than the deposit amount. And in India, China, they can produce anything at any cost. Okay. I'm not saying in a very negative way, but I'm saying how our system works. And a very low deposit will not encourage a consumer, especially, I mean, I'm not talking about a lower strata, but at least from a middle income onwards, for a span of 2 or 3 rupees, they will not go to the collection center. So it has to be calculated through a proper economic modeling, looking at purchasing power parity and arriving at the deposit. You need to take a call whether it should be a uniform deposit in all sizes or it should be differential. For example, in majority of countries, for bottles above 750 ml, they have a different deposit, and for a bottle of sizes less than 750 ml, they have a different deposit. But these are the system design which needs to take into account the local socioeconomic consideration. Then the other important principle is convenience. If a consumer doesn't have a convenience of returning the collection of the material, then the likelihood of collection rate will be on a lower side. So how extensive is your collection network? How easily it is accessible to the consumer is very important, and ensuring that entire system is transparent so that no fraudulent activities are taking place is an important element which contributes towards the success of the system. Third, these systems should be borne, the cost of these systems should be borne by the producers. In many countries, government thought, okay, let us bear the differential between cost and revenues by the government. No, you have to make the brunt to the producer. They are the one who should be covering the differential cost, because these additional EPR cost will make them change their product design, which is more environmental friendly. Today, if you are showing that I am fulfilling my EPR obligation and you are fulfilling 90% of them through a paper trails, then you are not contributing towards environment. So here, the true cost should be transferred to the producer. And we also advise that the unredeemed deposit till the collection reaches to 100%, which I'm sure will never reach, that unredeemed deposit should remain within the DRS operator for improving the performance of the system. For example, increasing the collection network, improving the logistic, and blah, blah, blah. There are so many ways where you can continuously improve the system performance. Last but not the least, these systems should be very strong from an integrity point of view. That's where the barcoding, QR coding, the data on the press of button, you should know what is getting collected, what is getting put to the market. All these 4 principles are vital in designing the DRS system. Quickly, please go to the next slide. And that would be the last slide for today. Each of these principles, we have further subdivided into elements. So these are 12 elements which a DRS law should consider if they are looking for 85% and above collection rate. And this is basically a synthesis of our last 50 years of experience. So if you implement these systems in alignment with the socioeconomic condition, then the chances are very high that you will have this system for perpetuity. Okay, this is, again, I'm repeating for the sake of argument, this is not a menu card that you pick 1, pick 7, pick 10. No, all of these elements need to be considered if you want a high performing DRS. From Tomra side, early this year, we have come up with a white paper on DRS based on our 5 years for 50 years of experience. I would recommend, if any one of you have got interest through my presentation, please download that white paper. There's a summary document and there's a detailed document, and they will cover each and every element in detail. There are a lot of case studies for each element, that how it affects the business performance or DRS performance, and what will not work if you don't do this. It is full of pictures, stats. I'm sure it is not going to be boring by any standard if you are interested in this system, or if you are interested in researching it, how it can work in Indian context. Because in Indian context, we have a big challenge in the form of informal sector, whose livelihood for times immemorial have been dependent on these valuables, which now will become a part of formal sector. So we need to see in the context whether we have to maintain the informal sector for perpetuity, or we need to upgrade them and make them as an integrated component of DRS. Those are the challenges which I'm currently working with my team abroad, and of course, with people like Dr. Samir and all. Ladakh visit is also linked with that, wherein we are looking for exploring the pilot here and see how we can develop something and show to government of India. And tomorrow, if it works, it can be replicated for the rest of the country, either at the state level or the city level, that we see. So with that, I am late by 6 minutes. My extreme apologies, and extreme apologies in case I have gone way too fast. I didn't want to present for 2 years because that would have been way too boring for you. I would now spend some time in taking questions from you and try to clarify which I might have inadvertently missed during the presentation. Thank you so much for patiently listening to me. Over to you, Dr. Irfan.
I am just spellbound by the level of knowledge, and it's I can say this is A to Z. This is new for all of us, and especially I talk about my personal self. I may be the ignorant person, but it's something. But it, from first slide to the last slide, or from the first word you dedicated to the last word you dedicated, all this seemed to be so practical and so relevant to the cause. That was more important. I request the Mr. Manish to kindly unmute Aruna. She wants to talk to Lavish. Please unmute. We can take direct questions also.
Absolutely. We have what 40 minutes, unless these people are starving for food. I'm available to talk. I enjoy talking on this subject.
Well, actually, this session is till 1:30, so we'll extend it. We can extend the next.
Your call.
Yeah. Somebody wants to ask question, please.
Yes. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Sir, really, it's a very nice session. First time I just recalling this such much information regarding deposit return scheme. Not only in India, but in of course you already told about how in other countries also going to like this one. So my question is that, sir, whatever the plastic waste is not collected, particularly in the most of the particular cities in India also, most of the plastic is not collected. So what kind of actions should be taken by the government at state level or at municipality level? That I want to ask, because most of the plastic is not collected. It will be just here and there in the dumping yard. So that will be my question.
You are expecting me to act like an environment minister of India?
No, sir, no, sir, no, sir. I'm also working on this one, sir. And most of the time, really, I have a very much cautious about this one. What should happen with this particular plastic? So okay. Really, I have a worries about it. Yes.
No, that's a very good question. And this is not something which is a problem for India, but it is a global problem. and marine littering is an outcome of our uncontrolled usage of material and then uncontrolled disposal. Now, fact of the matter is there is no single answer to this question. Otherwise, this would not have been a problem at all. However, EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility, is one such tool which is being utilized across the world. I think currently 160 countries in the world have EPR in some form or the other. It initially started with batteries, then tires, then electric and electronic. And now the latest focus is plastic or packaging, which is becoming a global problem. Now, the clear success of EPR lies on the design of it. Okay. Now, unfortunately, what has happened is when the EPR legislations are designed by the governments, they are designed or toned down in a manner to ensure that it does not result in the business disruption.
Yes.
So you start with the aim of saving the environment, but in the process of developing the policy, you start thinking about ensuring that it does not result in business disruption. You don't want to change the status quo. I mean, I'm talking from my personal experience. You know that last year, Government of India came up with the draft EPR framework, and they are still to come up with the final framework. And I have been representing TOMRA in most of the consultation with government, state government. You know, the waste is a state subject. So I've done maybe more than 100 consultations, even during the COVID times. What I could feel in the process, and I'm not going to name anybody in specific, everybody wants to have an EPR law which is not detrimental to him, notwithstanding whether it is going to benefit environment or not. The role of the government or the role of the policy should be to save the environment, to ensure not even a single gram of packaging should go to the environment. That is my mandate. My mandate is not to ensure whether plastic industry survives or recycling industry survive or not. They have to adjust to the overall objective of the policy. This is where I'm a big fan of European Union. European Union has 29 member countries, and they work on a subsidiarity principle. Subsidiarity principle work that European Union will make a directive that this is what I want to achieve out of it. And how to achieve is left for the member states to. Sorry? Okay. So European Union has come up with single-use plastic directive. They have made it very clear that I want 77% PET collection by 2025 and 90% by 2030. Recycle content by 2025, 25% and 20. That's it. How you do it, I leave up to you. If you don't fulfill, there are sanctions. So the European Union is governing the environmental policy to protect the environment. They are not thinking that how to save the business. Let me tell you one thing. Systems in countries like India and China are very agile. Businesses are very smart. The moment they will see the stick, which is non-negotiable, they will change overnight. But the moment they get to know that there is some negotiation possible, they will completely negotiate and tone down or water down the law. This is exactly what is happening. Madam, I do not have any magic wand which I can give you today and tomorrow the plastic. But I will clearly tell you, when you are drafting the policy or a law, your vision or your mission and objective should be very clear. Is this policy being developed to save the plastic environment from the plastic or save the business? But if you try to maintain optimum balance, it will never happen. Environment doesn't have a voice. Environment will always take a back seat. Your business will always come front. So this is my answer. I'm sorry if I've not given you the exact answer you want.
No. Yes, sir. I got it, sir. Definitely, you are given very. And actually, sir, your lecture is so nice because the first time I just listen about that is the deposit return schemes for the various countries. So it's very nice to listen to you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Pleasure is all mine. Pleasure is on mine.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, we can conclude in a way that this is a beautiful system, wonderful logistics, wonderful background and base, especially with 5 decades of experience behind this logical interpretation. The only thing that matters is the intention the participation of the governments, because without that, this all is not going to take any shape. And we have to understand that in a socio-economic setup that our country has, there might be some intentions that make it look difficult, but we have to understand that 20 years down the line, nobody would have thought about Swiggy, and nobody would have thought about Uber, or we didn't even think about cheap airlines 30 years back. But now this is the norm of the day. So we all, and especially the audience here, we all realize that it is very tough, it's very difficult as it looks today, but there is no way out. This has to be there if we want to save the environment, if we want to have something to show to our future generations. We have this. This is not only our responsibility, this is also the legal compliance. We have to legally comply to this system, otherwise we'll be left with no other option but to throw our environment out of the proportion, which already we have done. And as far as, especially as you rightly said, that a balance cannot be set here. The priority is our environment is a critically ill patient.
Absolutely.
We cannot leverage that balance to it.
Yes.
So we cannot think that our doctors are overworking. We didn't think that in pandemic because the situation was worse. So over and above everything, lead out the economics are outstanding, and thought is absolutely wonderful. But over and above, intention, responsibility, and participation of the general public, that is very important. Because ultimately, and surprisingly, I just admit this. Surprisingly, when we go out of India, like my sister or my parents, when they go to Canada, they participate in it. They take those empty bottles and they never throw them. But when they come up to India, yesterday only my aunt was saying that I wish, I was just talking to her about this topic, and I wish it comes here and I can at least deposit these milk pouches.
Yeah. Yeah,
because
absolutely.
there are people, there is this thought, but the system doesn't allow us right now to go ahead with this. I'm sure it will be very small proportion going by numbers, but even that small proportion makes a large impact in country like India, because we have such a big population level. And I am hopeful that Lavish, in near future, you are a change maker. You are striving in getting this change effectively, giving it a practical parameter, and we all are indebted to you for highlighting these points here, and we all would love to thank you for such an elaborate presentation. I personally will look forward for more details, and I'll be keeping a tag on your website, and I'll request all the participants to at least think and go to that website. I'll share this content with them also. And personally, I believe that this really was one of the best possible sessions we would have had in this FDP, because the concept in itself was new, and we all will inculcate this knowledge and pass on to our students. That is the basic of this FDP. Thank you so much for being here, for sparing your valuable time. And I must tell you that it's my humble request that whenever we have such platforms in the future, I'll definitely call you and get you here. And it's honor is all ours, sir. Thank you so much. And it was lovely having you here, and it was lovely talking to you. Thank you.
Just a quick word, Dr. Irfan.
Yeah.
I have sent the link of that white paper, which gives the detail to all of you. In case if you're interested, just download and read it. And you can
Sure.
always approach me. More than happy to solve.
Sure, sure.
Thank you so much for this
I'll
kind
keep listening. Thank you so much.
support on you.
God bless you.